Greetings to all Africans around the world and friends of Africa everywhere. Today is Friday, May 29th, 2026. My name is Akosua Prempeh and I am broadcasting from the United States of Africa. Welcome to United States of Africa TV, the voice of African unity, sovereignty and progress. In today's special report, we bring you a powerful Africa Day speech delivered by Julius Malema, leader of the Economic Freedom Fighters of South Africa. In this speech, Malema reflects on Africa's long struggle against slavery, colonialism, apartheid, and neo-colonialism. He also discusses the importance of Pan-Africanism, economic liberation, African unity, youth empowerment, and the vision of a stronger and more self-reliant continent. The speech highlights the contributions of great African leaders such as Kwame Nkrumah, Julius Nyerere, Thomas Sankara, Patrice Lumumba, and many others who dedicated their lives to the liberation and advancement of Africa. It also examines some of the major challenges facing the continent today, including economic dependency, regional conflicts, debt, unemployment, and divisions among African people. As Africa continues its journey toward greater unity and development, this speech raises important questions about the future direction of the continent and the role that Africans themselves must play in shaping that future. Before we begin, please subscribe to United States of Africa TV. Like this video, leave your comments, and share this report with your family and friends. Help us connect Africans across the continent and throughout the diaspora. Share this video on WhatsApp, Telegram, Facebook, X, Instagram, and all social media platforms so that together we can promote African unity, economic freedom, and a brighter future for generations to come. Now, let's watch the report.
Thank you very much, DP. Ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, Ambassadors, High Commissioners, Commissars, Secretary General, Deputy President, and the leadership of Gauteng, including our MMCs and public representatives, distinguished dignitaries, representatives of African nations, leadership of economic freedom fighters. Allow me to begin with the words of Emperor Haile Selassie at the foundation of the Organization of African Unity in Addis Ababa on the 25th of May 1963, when he said, "We must act to shape and mold the future and leave our imprint on events as they slip past into history." And as Kwame Nkrumah warned the continent during the historic gathering, "We must unite or perish." These words, spoken during a moment of crisis, uncertainty, and revolutionary possibility for the African continent. Africa Day is more than just the celebration of an institution. It is the celebration of centuries of resistance against conquest, slavery, colonialism, apartheid, and fragmentation. The formation of the Organization of African Unity in 1963, which later became the African Union in 2002, did not happen in peaceful conditions. It was born during one of the most turbulent periods in African and global history. At the time, much of Africa was either under direct colonial rule or had only recently gained political independence. European powers had partitioned Africa through the Berlin Conference of 1884 to 1885 without the consent of African people, dividing communities, kingdoms, and nations with artificial borders designed to weaken African unity and facilitate colonial extraction. By the 1950s and 1960s, Africa had become the front line of anti-colonial struggle. Ghana had achieved independence in 1957 under the leadership of Kwame Nkrumah, becoming the first sub-Saharan African country to free itself from colonial rule in modern era. Nkrumah understood that Ghana's freedom will mean nothing if the rest of Africa remained colonized. That is why he famously declared that the independence of Ghana is meaningless unless it is linked to the total liberation of Africa. At the same time, Algeria was fighting one of the bloodiest anti-colonial wars against French occupation. Millions across Africa watched as Algerians sacrificed their lives for national liberation. In Congo, Patrice Lumumba had emerged as a symbol of African sovereignty and dignity after independence in 1960. But because he demanded real control over Congolese resources, he was overthrown and assassinated with the involvement of Western powers and local collaborators. His assassination became a warning to Africa about the dangers of neocolonialism and foreign interference. Across Southern Africa, apartheid South Africa, colonial Rhodesia, and Portuguese-controlled Mozambique and Angola remained brutal settler strongholds. Liberation movements such as the ANC, PAC, MPLA, Frelimo, SWAPO, and ZANU were intensifying armed struggle against racist minority regimes. At the same time, the Cold War was dividing the world between the United States and the Soviet Union. Africa risked becoming a battleground for foreign ideological and military competition rather than determining its own independent path. It was under these conditions that African leaders realized unity was necessary for survival. The formation of the Organization of African Unity in Addis Ababa was on 25 May 1963, was therefore driven by several urgent objectives. Firstly, to support the liberation of all African countries still under colonial and apartheid rule. Secondly, to protect the sovereignty of newly independent African states from external interferences and coups. Thirdly, to promote solidarity amongst African nations after centuries of divisions imposed by colonial borders. Fourthly, to create mechanisms for cooperation in economic development, democracy, education, health, and infrastructure. Finally, to restore the dignity of African people after centuries of dehumanization through slavery and colonialism. The movement towards unity was led by some of the greatest revolutionary thinkers and statesmen the continent has ever produced. Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana was perhaps the most outspoken advocate for the United States of Africa, arguing that political fragmentation will keep Africa weak and colonially dependent. Emperor Haile Selassie of Ethiopia played a crucial diplomatic role in bringing African leaders together in Addis Ababa. Ethiopia carried enormous symbolic significance because it was one of the few African nations to resist full colonial occupation and had become a symbol of African independence globally. Gamal Abdel Nasser of Egypt championed anti-imperialism and Arab-African solidarity while positioning Egypt as a central force in continental politics. Julius Nyerere of Tanzania advanced African socialism and supported liberation movements across Southern Africa, turning Tanzania into a base for anti-colonial struggles. Ahmed Ben Bella of Algeria emerged directly from armed resistance against French colonialism and strongly supported revolutionary movements across the continent. Leaders such as Sékou Touré of Guinea, Modibo Keita of Mali, and later Samora Machel, Agostinho Neto, Thomas Sankara, and Muammar Gaddafi all carried forward different dimensions of Pan-African vision. The OAU played a decisive role in supporting liberation movements militarily, diplomatically, and politically. It helped isolate apartheid South Africa internationally, supported independence struggles in Angola, Mozambique, Namibia, Zimbabwe, Guinea-Bissau, and elsewhere, and created a platform through which Africa could speak collectively against colonialism and racism. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, African leaders recognized that the post-colonial challenges facing the continent require a strong continental institution, globalization, economic dependency, debt crisis, conflict, and underdevelopment demanded a more integrated African response. This led to the transformation of the OAU into African Union in 2002. The African Union was envisioned as a more active institution capable not only of political solidarity, but also economic integration, peacekeeping, infrastructure coordination, continental development, stronger African representation in global affairs. The AU emerged from the recognition that Africa could no longer survive merely as a collective of weak, fragmented states operating individually in a global system dominated by powerful economic blocs, and that historic mission remains unfinished. However, comrades and compatriots, the truthful history of African liberation can never be told without recognizing the women of Africa. Too often, history remembers men with guns and podiums while forgetting the women who carried revolutions on their backs, hid freedom fighters in their homes, crossed border carrying intelligence, organized underground movements, mobilized communities, educated generations, and in many cases took up arms themselves against colonialism and apartheid. The freedom of Africa was not won by men alone. It was won by women such as Queen Nzinga of Angola, who resisted Portuguese colonial expansion in the 17th century with extraordinary military and diplomatic skills. It was won by different kinds of women in different kinds of the continent and countries. It was won by Josina Michel of Mozambique, who became a symbol of women participation in the armed struggle through Frelimo. It was won by Winnie Madikizela Mandela, Albertina Sisulu, Lilian Ngoyi, Charlotte Maxeke, and countless women of South Africa who endured burnings, imprisonment, torture, exile, and harassment while sustaining the anti-apartheid struggle. It was won by women combatants in Algeria who carried bombs through colonial checkpoints and stood at the center of the Algerian Revolution. It was won by the women of Guinea-Bissau, Angola, Zimbabwe, Namibia, Kenya, and Tanzania who transformed liberation movements from isolated military campaigns into mass popular struggles. We have to ask ourselves, have we fulfilled the dream of those who gathered in Addis Ababa in 1963? Or we just continuing with business as usual because we do not care about the historical mission of those who came before us? The answer is both yes and no. Yes, because Africa has defeated formal colonialism and apartheid. Yes, because African people continue to rise with resilience, creativity, and determination. Yes, because despite every obstacle placed before us, Africa continues to produce victories that deserve celebration. We commend Ethiopia for the Grand Ethiopian Resistance Dam, a symbol of African ambition, African engineering, and African self-determination. We recognize the advances made in Rwanda in healthcare, technology, and public administration. We commend Botswana for exercising relative stability and greater control over its mineral wealth. We celebrate Kenya's leadership in financial technology and geothermal energy innovation. We salute Nigeria for building one of the world's largest creative industries through Nollywood and for shaping global music and culture through Afrobeats. We celebrate South Africa's scientists and researchers who demonstrated African excellence during COVID-19 pandemic. We recognize the growing assertion of sovereignty by countries such as Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, whose people increasingly demand that African resources must benefit African people rather than foreign powers. We celebrate the African Continental Free Trade Area as an important step towards economic integration and intra-African trade. Perhaps most importantly, we celebrate the rebirth of Pan-African consciousness amongst African youth, young Africans who are rejecting inferiority, reconnecting with African identity, and demanding dignity, opportunity, and self-determination. As we celebrate Africa Day, we cannot do so honestly without confronting the painful realities facing parts of our continent today. Because while Africa possesses extraordinary potential, millions of Africans continue to live under conditions of war, displacement, occupation, instability, and humanitarian crisis. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, one of the most richest countries on earth in terms of natural resources, generations of people continue to suffer violence, displacements, and exploitation. Eastern Congo remains trapped in cycles of armed conflict involving militias, foreign interferences, illegal mineral extraction, and regional instability. Countless lives have been lost in what has often been described as one of the most deadliest conflicts since the Second World War. In Sudan, we are witnessing another devastating humanitarian catastrophe. The conflict between foreign-sponsored rival military forces has displaced millions of people internally and across borders, destroyed infrastructure, disrupted healthcare system, and deepened hunger and insecurity. Sudan is a painful reminder of what happens when militarization, political instability, foreign interest, and weak democratic institutions converge. Ordinary Sudanese people, workers, women, children, students, families continue to pay their highest price for struggles over political power. In Somalia, decades of instability, conflict, terrorism, foreign intervention, and humanitarian crisis continue to affect millions of lives. Yet, Somalia also represents something important: the resilience of African people even under extreme conditions. Despite decades of war and fragmentation, Somalia community continues to build businesses, sustain families, maintain social networks, and reconstruct institutions. The Somali people deserve more than permanent humanitarian management by external actors. They deserve long-term peace, development, sovereignty, and investment in reconstruction. Africa must move beyond seeing Somalia only through the lens of conflict and instead support genuine state building, economic development, and regional stability led by Africans themselves. We must also speak clearly about Western Sahara, as it remains one of the last unresolved decolonization struggles on the African continent. For decades, the Sahrawi people have continued their struggle for self-determination in the face of occupation and displacement by Morocco. Africa cannot claim to stand fully for liberation while the question of Western Sahara remains unresolved. The right of people to determine their own future is a principle rooted deeply in the anti-colonial history of our continent. The crisis across Congo, Sudan, Somalia, Western Sahara, and elsewhere reminds us of important truth. Africa's peace and stability are interconnected. Instability in one African country quickly becomes instability for neighboring regions through displacement, economic disruption, trafficking, extremism, food insecurity, and humanitarian collapse. Africa cannot continue responding to continental crises through fragmentation and dependency on external powers whose interests are often geopolitical rather than humanitarian. We need stronger Africa peace-building institutions, stronger regional cooperation, Africa-led conflict resolution, investment in development, education, healthcare, economic opportunity, because poverty and hopelessness create fertile ground for instability. If we are to speak honestly about Africa, we must also speak about the material condition of our economy, both its weaknesses and its enormous untapped potential. Today, Africa's combined gross domestic product stands approximately at $3 trillion in nominal terms, making it about 2.5% of the global economy, despite Africa being home to roughly 18% of the world population. This imbalance alone tells the story of structural injustice in the global economic system. However, it also tells another story, that Africa remains massively underdeveloped, not because of lack of resources, but because of lack of industrialization and value additions. Sub-Saharan Africa is projected to grow at around 3.5 to 4.3% annually, making it one of the fastest growing regions in the world. However, this growth is not yet transforming the lived realities of the majority of African people because it is driven largely by raw material exports rather than manufacturing and industrial capacity. One of the clearest contradictions is trade within the continent itself. Intra-African trade remains at roughly 15% to 18% of total African trade, meaning that more than 80% of African trade is still conducted outside the continent with Europe, Asia, and North America. This shows that Africa continues to trade more with the outside world than with itself. This is why initiatives like the African Continental Free Trade Area are urgent. Without internal trade integration, Africa will remain a supplier of raw materials and consumer of finished goods produced elsewhere. On debt, the situation is equally serious. African governments are expected to face more than $90 billion in external debt repayment in 2026 alone, placing enormous pressure on national budgets already struggling with unemployment, infrastructure backlogs, and social instability. In many countries, debt servicing consumes more resources than investment in health or education, meaning the future is being financed at the expense of the present. Despite these challenges, there are important signs of transformation. Africa is a home to nearly $4 trillion in institutional assets, including pension funds and sovereign wealth funds. This is capital that is increasingly being discussed as a foundation of self-financing development rather than dependency on external aid. This shows that Africa is not poor, but financially fragmented. If properly mobilized, African capital alone could finance infrastructure, industrialization, and development across the continent. The contradiction is clear that Africa is growing, but not transforming fast enough. Africa is trading, but not with itself. Africa is wealthy in resources, but poor in ownership and industrial capacity. Africa is financially rich on paper, but structurally dependent in practice. The task before us is therefore to transform them into material change for African people, because true economic freedom will only be achieved when Africa produces what it consumes, trades with itself, controls its own value chain, and turns raw material into finished goods on African soil. This is the next stage of the African revolution. Comrades and compatriots, no conversation about the future of Africa can be completed without speaking about the youth of our continent, because Africa is the youngest continent on earth. African youth make up nearly 60% of continent's population, and by 2030, Africa is expected to account for 42% of all young people globally. Additionally, the median age of Africa is just above 18 years old. This means humanity's future is increasingly tied to the future of African youth. Yet, despite the enormous demographic advantage, millions of young Africans continue to confront unemployment, poor education system, migration crisis, inequality, and economic exclusion. Too many Africans, graduates, leave university only to enter economies that cannot absorb their skills. Too many young Africans cross deserts and oceans searching for opportunity because our economy has failed to create meaningful work and dignified lives. Despite this hardship, African youth continue to rise with extraordinary creativity and determination. Young Africans are transforming global culture through music, fashion, film, technology, sports, and entrepreneurship. Young Africans are also shaping political consciousness across the continents, from Feast Must Fall in South Africa to youth-led democratic mobilization in Senegal to the young fighters who stood to reject the finance bill in Kenya and end SARS in Nigeria. History teaches us that this is nothing new. Patrice Lumumba was only 35 years old when he became Prime Minister of Congo and confronted imperialism directly. Thomas Sankara transformed Burkina Faso before the age of 40, and the young people of Soweto in 1976 shook the apartheid regime and inspired the world through fearless resistance. The history of African liberation has always been written by courageous youth, and that is why the greatest betrayal of African youth today is not only unemployment, but the absence of vision from leadership. The young Africans do not want to be isolated and excluded. The young Africans want to be given an opportunity to participate because they've got the ideas. We must not be threatened by the young people, especially as the older generation. Above all, they want the right to build successful lives on African soil because Africa is what they know, and nothing else will ever make sense to the young Africans except Africa itself. We must do away with the leadership that is threatened by young people and always want to isolate them and destroy them young, because by doing so, you are destroying the future of Africa. In recent weeks, our continent has once again confronted the devastating reality of Ebola outbreaks in parts of DRC and Uganda. And these outbreaks, hundreds of suspected cases and deaths have been recorded, with the World Health Organization warning that in some instances the spread has outpaced response efforts and overwhelmed already fragile health systems. These outbreaks have been made more severe not only by the virus itself, but by deeper structural conditions, under-resourced healthcare system, conflict in Eastern Congo, displacement of communities, mistrust in public health intervention, and attacks on healthcare facilities attempting to save lives. What this teaches us is clear. Health crises in Africa are never just medical crises. They are political, economic, and social crises at the same time. Yet, even in the face of such tragedy, African health workers, scientists, and communities have shown extraordinary resilience. Uganda, for example, has repeatedly demonstrated the capacity to contain Ebola outbreaks through rapid coordination, surveillance, and community response system, often bringing outbreaks under control within months. We therefore salute the nurses, doctors, volunteers, and community leaders who place themselves on the front lines of this crisis, often without adequate resources to protect African life. No African country can fight pandemic alone. No border can stop a virus, and no nation can build health security in isolation with its neighbors if its neighbors are weak. That is why we must strengthen continental cooperation in public health, invest in African pharmaceutical capacity, support African research institutions, and ensure that never again does Africa depend entirely on external powers for emergency responses to crises that are ours. This was made even more evident to us when, during the COVID-19 virus, Western powers were ready to let us die while they hoarded vaccines and refused to deliver vaccines already paid for by African countries. The dignity of African people demands more from us, and as we speak about African unity and Pan-Africanism, we must confront one of the greatest dangers facing the continent today: Afrophobia. What some call xenophobia against fellow Africans is in truth Afrophobia, which is the hatred, suspicion, exclusion, and criminalization of African people by fellow Africans themselves. We must also be honest that Afrophobia is not new, and it did not begin in South Africa in 2008 or 2015. It is part of a long colonial strategy designed to divide African people, weaken solidarity, and make unity impossible. Colonialism survived by convincing Africans that they were strangers to one another. The Berlin Conference divided us artificially into Anglophone, Francophones, Lusophones, Arab Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, North Africa, East Africa, Western Africa, and Southern Africa, not for our benefit, but to fragment African identity and prevent continental unity. From slavery to colonialism, to neocolonialism, to modern financial domination, the pattern has remained the same. Africa is valued for its mineral, labor, land, strategic position, and markets, but African lives themselves are treated as disposable. The world speaks about democracy and human rights, yet throughout history, it has repeatedly supported dictatorship, coups, destabilization campaigns, assassinations, and wars whenever African leaders attempted to exercise genuine sovereignty over African wealth. When Patrice Lumumba demanded control over Congolese resources, he was removed and assassinated. When Thomas Sankara sought to free Burkina Faso from dependency and debt, he was isolated and overthrown. When Muammar Gaddafi promoted African financial independence and continental integration, Libya was destroyed under the banner of humanitarian intervention, leaving instability across the Sahel that continues to this day. The destruction of Libya did not only destroy Libya, it destabilized Mali, Niger, Chad, Sudan, and the border region through weapons, militant activities, trafficking networks, and migration crises. This is how imperialism functions. One African country is weaponized against another, instability in one region becomes a crisis for neighboring states, and divisions weaken the continental collectively. White supremacy understood very early that a united Africa will become an unstoppable political and economic force, and so division became a weapon. We have seen painfully examples of this throughout modern African history. In 1969, the government of Ghana, under those orders, expelled hundreds of thousands of undocumented migrants, many of them Nigerians and Western Africans who had contributed to the Ghanaian economy. Years later, during economic crisis in the 1980s, Nigeria retaliated by expelling millions of Western African migrants, including large number of Ghanaians. This cycle of retaliation between the two great African nations demonstrated how quickly economic hardship can be manipulated into hostility against fellow Africans. Instead of confronting neo-colonial economic structure and elite failures, ordinary Africans became targets. In Zimbabwe, the Kukurahundi massacre of the 1980s remained one of the most painful chapters in the post-independence African history. Thousands of many Ndebele civilians were killed during brutal state crackdown in Matabeleland. This tragedy reminds us that ethnic chauvinism and political intolerance can become deadly when power is not guided by democratic accountability and Pan-African humanism. Across Northern Africa, many blacks continue to face racism, exploitation, arbitrary detention, slave trafficking, and violence while migrating through Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, and other transit regions. The collapse of Libya after NATO intervention intensified the suffering of black African migrants, many of whom were falsely accused of being mercenaries, imprisoned, tortured, sold into slave markets, or abandoned in inhumane conditions. In recent years, inflammatory rhetoric against sub-Saharan Africans, parts of North Africa, has contributed to attacks, discrimination, and expulsion of vulnerable migrants whose only crime was searching for dignity and survival. And of course, we have witnessed repeated waves of anti-African violence in South Africa itself, where migrants from Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Somalia, Ethiopia, Nigeria, Malawi, Congo, and elsewhere have been attacked, displaced, looted, and killed. We must say clearly, this violence can never be justified. An unemployed South African and an unemployed Zimbabwean are both victims of the same global system of inequality and exploitation. A Nigerian street trader and a South African worker are not enemies. A Somali shopkeeper and a township resident are not enemies. The true enemy is the system that keeps African people poor while a tiny elite accumulates wealth. Kwame Nkrumah warned us when he said, "The forces that unite us are intrinsic and greater than the superimposed influences that keeps us apart." Julius Nyerere also reminds us, without unity, there is no future for Africa. Thomas Sankara taught us that imperialism often occurs in more subtle forms: loan, food, aid, blackmail. Part of that subtle imperialism is teaching Africans to fear one another instead of confronting the structure that exploits all of us collectively. We must also never forget that African liberation itself depended on solidarity across borders. South African freedom fighters found refuge in Zambia, Tanzania, Angola, Mozambique, Algeria, Ethiopia, Libya, Zimbabwe, and Nigeria. Mozambique and Angola suffered destabilization and military attacks because they supported the anti-apartheid struggle. Nigeria funded liberation movements across Southern Africa. Tanzania became a home for exiled revolutionaries from across the continent, and Algeria trained liberation fighters from anti-colonial movements throughout Africa. No African country liberated itself entirely alone, and that is why Afrophobia is not only morally wrong, it is historically ignorant. It is a betrayal of liberation struggles, a betrayal of Pan-Africanism, and a betrayal of the spirit of 1963 Addis Ababa. Comrades, we must understand something fundamental. In the global system, Africans only truly have one another. Europe will defend European interests. America will defend American interests. China will defend Chinese interests. Africa must defend African interests. Fellow Africans, the dream of Africa, of a united Africa, is not impossible. It is possible to establish a common African currency in the future. It is possible to build integrated rail and transport system from Cape to Cairo. It is possible to establish African-controlled financial institutions that free us from dependency on the IMF and World Bank. It is possible to create visa-free movement across the continent. It is possible to create universities that lead the world into science and medicine. It is possible to create a borderless Africa like Africa was before the Berlin Conference. What is required is political courage, and the EFF remains committed to the total liberation of Africa, not only from neo-colonial rule, but from economic exploitation, inequality, corruption, tribalism, and dependency. As we commemorate Africa Day, let us remember that history will judge our generation not by the speeches we made, but by whether we transformed material conditions of African people. The task before us is clear: unite Africa, industrialize Africa, democratize Africa, defend Africa, liberate Africa economically. There is no room for anyone who wants to hate Africans. There is no room for black-on-black violence. Africa must stand up and say, we are one, and will never listen to the voice of ignorant people who don't know where we come from. We are who we are because of those who came before us. We are one blood, we are one skin, and we remain the same victims all over the world. Africans are hated in South Africa. Africans are hated in Africa. Africans are hated in the whole global village. And therefore, it is now the time for Africans to show one another love. And this mission should be achieved in our lifetime. I thank you.
Thank you for watching this important report on Julius Malema's Africa Day address. The future of Africa will depend on the decisions made by today's leaders, the participation of African youth, and the willingness of Africans everywhere to work together toward a common vision. Whether you agree or disagree with some of the views expressed in this speech, The conversation about Africa's future is one that concerns every African. We would love to hear your thoughts. Please leave your comments in the comment section below and join the discussion. Question 1. Do you believe that a stronger and more united Africa can be achieved through greater economic cooperation, free movement, and increased trade among African countries? Question 2. What practical steps should African leaders and citizens take today to strengthen Pan-African unity and ensure that Africa's resources benefit African people first? Share your views in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, and share this video on WhatsApp, Telegram, Facebook, X, Instagram, and all social media platforms. Together, we can help build a stronger, united, and prosperous Africa. Thank you for watching United States of Africa TV.